Welcome to Behind the Backline, the podcast where we chat with merchants, brands, and industry professionals in the musical instrument, pro audio, and event technology space about their products, services, industry trends, stories, and more. Join us now as we dig into the stories behind our favorite backline gear.
Welcome to episode 28 of Behind the Backline. I'm Matt Jacoby of Octave Media, and today I am speaking with Jeff Hankin of Carolina Drumworks. Thanks for joining me today, Jeff.
My pleasure, Matt. Good to talk with you.
Yeah, looking forward to learning more a little bit about Carolina. So let's start off a little bit by telling us a little bit about who you are and what Carolina does.
Okay. I am a drummer of, I hate to say how many decades now. And I started out in playing classical music, got into jazz, and then into blues, and then into rock, and played in a lot of kinds of ensembles and a lot of kinds of music over the years. But I got into I started building snare drums, and now I do what I describe as high-end snares and occasional kits. It kind of filled in. It started that when I'd hit about 50, if I can use the number, years of playing, and the hours were getting kind of late, and the gear was getting kind of heavy, and I got hooked on the drum building aspect of it, which has done wonders for my woodworking skills. Then it became a company about 10 years ago, actually 10 years and I guess 2 months ago. So what I try to do is I try to build drums that I want to play, and then afterwards part company with them. But it means that I'm striving for as high a pinnacle as I can get to, which gets me into more and more detail and more little touches and TLC, and hopefully gradually improving product over the years.
Yeah, well, happy 10-year anniversary. I didn't notice that it was 2008. So I hope you're having a giant celebration this year for 10 years.
Yeah. Well, every year is a celebration.
Okay. Well, I think you have a lot to be celebrating. I mean, just looking at your website, I'll give it a quick plug, is carolinadrumworks.com. If it's not just the photography, I would assume, these drums they look fantastic. I wish I kind of had one. So.
Well, Thank you. I know people talk about use the phrase labor of love, but these things are I don't have that much equipment. For example, the finishes are all hand applied. I don't even own any spray equipment, and what that means is I can get very hands on with the drums as they're in progress. I get to visit with them every day for a few minutes each, and it's really satisfying to me to kind of get involved with the instruments at that level.
You make it sound like you have a little conversation with them every day. Is that because you have
almost? Well, it's interesting you should say that, because they really, each one has its own individual character.
Yeah.
Just starting from the point that every board is different, every tree is different. And so they have personalities, and I have to sometimes give in to them.
Gotcha. They yell at you if you don't, right?
Right.
So you officially started Carolina in 2008, but you've been making them for longer. Is that right?
A little bit longer, yeah. I pretty quickly hit the point where other members of my household were saying, "So, what are you going to do with all these drums?" And then I had a couple of small businesses in the past, so it just kind of got the trademark established and got the business structure set up, and then I can go back to having fun.
Awesome. Yeah. If this is what you love to do, then I'm sure you have a blast every day then, huh?
Yeah. It's at this point, I'm still gigging some, and teaching a little bit, which is also very satisfying. And so I've kind of got my life balanced on those three tripod legs.
Okay. So, you made the transition from playing to building. and maybe you touched on this a little bit already, but what kind of was the inspiration to make that gap? Like, is there a major reason why this was more fun than playing primarily, or?
Well, kind of two steps to that. One is kind of early on in the process. I happened to, somebody gave me a copy of Mickey Hart's book, Drumming on the Edge of Magic, and in it he's talking about sort of the mystical aspect of drumming, but he says at one point that he thinks every drummer should build himself a drum and play it just for the experience and for the connection that way. So I went online on eBay and I put in a bid on a shell, and nobody else bid, and so I had to build it out. And the second part was I discovered kind of early in the process I like taking snare drums to jam sessions, not to play, but to just put them up on the stand for the evening, and it gives me a chance to hear sometimes 12 different drummers playing the same instrument and in the same mix with the same band, same room, and as you know, you'll hear 12 different characters to that drum just by the way these different folks play. But one of the things I discovered is it really, really, really makes me happy to have somebody that's a much better drummer than I am play on these things. And one of the first really significant drummers that I had a chance to build for was Dennis Chambers. And I can't describe what it is to have Dennis playing a drum that I made for him. It's more exciting than being on the stage for me.
Yeah, it's got to be kind of a dream come true. I've heard this from other people too. When someone can make it sing or do what it's meant to do. Uh-huh. From a third party perspective, and getting a chance to see it from the audience's perspective. That's
right. It's also a great education for me because hearing these things out front, hearing a drum when you're sitting right over it is very, very different from hearing it out front. And even in a non-acoustic situation, or talking to the sound men about what they're doing or not doing with the sound once they get it. And that helps me in fine tuning an instrument. It helps me make it do what it needs to do out front, even though that's not necessarily what the drummer sitting over it hears.
Mm-hmm. No, totally, that makes sense. So in terms of taking the road less traveled, it feels like more and more people are making their own drums these days, but it depends on if they're really good at it or not. Kind of like craft brewing. Right. Do you feel that what you do kind of fills a particular gap in the market space between like the popular brands and people that are on the smaller, maybe different type of custom end? I know there's people will distinguish themselves with what they are when they're custom.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a gap. If I describe it as a gap, it's relatively unpopulated territory. My orientation is toward refining these drums as musical instruments. So you have in the design of a drum, you have I'd say literally dozens of factors that can influence the sound, the playability, the character, the usability, one way or another. And the process for me is to try to get all these factors in alignment so that they're working toward the same goal. I think I see a lot of drums built where the bearing edge profile may be conflicting with the snare beds in terms of what they accomplish, and they're actually weakening each other instead of helping each other. Those two things. So I feel like I'm in a constant state of exploring and refining and getting better at each of these little nuances. What happens with that is there are hours and hours and hours and hours of detail and attention that go into these things, which puts them in a pretty select niche. I'm not saying that there aren't others doing the same thing, but not that many. And certainly it's a far cry from the mass production drums that you see out in the stores and online.
Yeah. So on that same note, like how long does it take you to craft a drum from start to finish on like an average?
Well, I've never added up the hours because I kind of don't want to know.
Yeah.
Because if I knew, I would know what I was making per hour, and I would be really upset. But generally, if it's a solid shell, like a stave or a steam bend, and those are the bulk of the drums that I do. It's usually running around 5 months, start to finish.
Okay.
From the time it's aboard to the time it's a drum in the customer's hands.
And that sounds like a lot of attention detail and materials, time, everything. I mean, do you find that certain materials work better than others, or is it mainly just whatever the end goal is for the sound and for the customer?
Well, it's the goal for the sound of the customer, and normally I like to and generally have kind of long dialogues at the beginning of the process with the customer, and sometimes they're just ongoing conversations that are kind of on and off over literally months or years.
Gotcha.
Before we're ready to do the build. But it's my recommendations are always going to be, first of all, tone woods, good tone woods, and second, starting from what kind of music are you playing? What kind of sound are you trying to produce? What feel makes you happy when you're playing a drum? And that can steer toward certain species. Sometimes, there have been questions about the environment that people live in, because these drums go all over the country. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, there are temperature issues, humidity issues, and certain kinds of wood will perform better or be easier to work with for the player.
Yeah, good point. Especially where I live, where it gets super humid and the air conditioning is probably screwing up my drum kit as we speak. So
this is why they invented ply.
Exactly. Do you feel that like the metals and the accessories and all the hardware and everything, is depending on how that's applied or what type of materials are used? Is that also usually?
Yeah, both the application and the materials. On my snares, I use tube lugs that they're my design, and I have them machined specifically for these drums. And the posts of the lugs are generally solid brass, which is a nice sonic metal. And the tubes are stainless steel, polished stainless steel, which has a couple of advantages. One being that the threading is very, very precise and very durable. So if there is any problem with something stripping, it's going to be, the 80-cent tension rod and not the tube. But some of those metals carry vibration, carry sound better than others. One of the big questions in that is aluminum, because aluminum generally will not deaden but flatten out a sound a little bit. So you need to be careful how you use it. The other thing is the amount of mass that you put on the shell, because that has a great influence on the tonality of the shell and the resonance of the shell. So these are, tube lugs end up being very strong with a very small footprint. The first time that you attach a lug or other hardware to a drum shell, you can hear the difference. One lug will do it just instantly. So again, taking that into account, the more mass, the higher the fundamental pitch. And that's why the drums with the thick shells get very loud and don't have very much tone. So there's always in everything, all these little details that I keep talking about. There's a balance between projection, volume, and tone. I work with steam bend shells and stave shells and ply shells, and I like them to be usually all in the same configuration, which is to say 1/4 inch thick with reinforcement rings. They might be milled in or they might be added that make it 1/2 inch thick at the edges, and that stays consistent no matter what type of construction I'm working with. with.
Okay.
And that I find is just the best balance of keeping good tone.
Awesome. Now, I kind of had this thought, and I think this pertains more to toms because I know, it's kind of more of a popular thing now. What does it take when you say that, lugs affect the sound of a shell immediately, even with just one? What do you work at all with the suspended mounts at all, where you usually use like the hoop versus actually attaching the any missing hardware?
Yeah, usually, I mean, it's a discussion with customers. I think just about all of them have wanted suspension mounts.
Okay.
On their toms. One thing I do, the resonance and the sustain on a tom is an interesting thing. You can always take away sustain, but you can't add it to a drum. So I like to do on a kit. I do what I call graduated bearing edges. So that the smaller drums, which generally don't ring as much, get a sharper edge profile, and as we go down to larger sizes, those profiles become rounder because usually people have more trouble with too much sustain and ring getting muddy in floor toms, for example. But you never know with the situation. I was at a music performance a few months ago. A really good drummer using what I know to be a really good kit was not one of mine, but I know the builder. And I know that these drums are nice and resonant, and toms are nice and resonant. And in performance, he was playing with like dish towels over the drum heads.
Huh.
I mean, this is way beyond moon gel, right?
Yeah.
So, but I guess it worked out for what the sound man wanted. It seems like there was not maybe the right match in the drum design for the way he wanted to use them, or the sound he wanted, or the heads he was using. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think that any of the major head makers create dish towel heads that I've made to date.
It takes me back to the days of the oil filled heads and the internal mufflers and everything going into session work.
Yeah, I always, for the life of me, and over about 2.5 decades of playing, I'm like, I do not want a pillow in my bass drum.
And yet you still see them.
Yeah, I mean, I get the deadening, but I guess I like the ring, and I feel like the bounce is affected and everything. It just kind of kills everything. I try to play more with the front head hole versus not having one instead, and that seems to work a little bit better than throwing bedding in your drum. So I have to ask, are you a solo shop, or do you have other people who help you craft them?
I am solo. There are some parts I don't do in my shop. This is one of the reasons that I don't do a lot of kits, is my shop is tiny. And frankly, it's not big enough for multiple people. Also, I have had businesses in the past that involved payroll, and I resolved never to do that again.
Gotcha.
But there are various functions that go outside. For example, I don't know how to mill metal. I'm not set up to do it, and it's not something I really feel like spending my time on. So I work closely with a metal shop on doing the lugs, etc. Some of the shells are made in-house, some of the shells are not made in-house, and that really depends on who's going to do it best for the intended project. And I would rather have somebody that's better at a certain aspect of that than I am do it, because I'm delivering the best product I can.
Yeah.
On the other hand, going in and making a bunch of sawdust is fun. So there are plenty of them that are just done in the shop.
It's said that to maintain your passion, you need to find the things that bring you joy, and you're supposed to get rid of the things that are a burden. So if you enjoy making sawdust, you've found your true calling in drum making.
I'm not going to say that there's not some burdensome things, but it's this is a process that requires a lot of patience in a lot of ways, and it's not unusual. I mean, most of the drums, for example, get about 20 applications of various types of finish.
Wow.
And with a whole lot of sanding. And it's not unknown for me to get to a certain point in that process and say, I'm not satisfied, and strip it back down and start over, which is one of the reasons that it takes a while to produce. But I really want to get to the best end result possible. And as long as I don't add up how many hours I'm spending, preventing me from doing that.
Exactly. It's about the quality versus the little paycheck that you don't want to know about.
Right. And I have a luxury in approaching it this way, because I have there are a lot of things that I won't do. There are colors that I won't do. I don't wrap kits or drums. There are, I'll use my lugs, and otherwise it's not something that I can badge. So there are times when a customer will say, I want this and such, I want that and such. And if I need to, I'll draw the line and say, maybe I'm not the guy.
Yeah, no, takes a lot to come to that conclusion, but to have the perfect end game or the end goal, may or may not be the right thing or right fit. So while I noticed you do not have like an official player endorsement program or of any sort, because everything is kind of custom, do you have any recognizable names out there who are touting your drums?
Yeah, well, Dennis, of course,
Yep.
The first one that I'm ready to mention.
All right, yep.
Jeff Sipe, who's played with Derek Trucks, Jimmy Herring, Bela Fleck, a guy named Bill Berg, who is not a huge name, but he was a founding member of Slim and the BBs a while back, and he's a wonderful jazz fusion drummer, and he's actually the drummer on the Bob Dylan Blood on the Tracks album.
Awesome.
River Gagurian, who is just an outstanding world percussionist who's played on hundreds of albums and soundtracks, and I was actually able to design a drum specifically for him that became one of the 4 series of snare drums that I do, so that it would work with hand percussion and hand playing, for that matter, and be compatible with a hybrid kit of world percussion instruments. Christopher Williams out of Nashville, who tours he's playing with the Gene Simmons band these days, and he's been in the German metal group Accept for the past 4 years, touring all over the world. He's toured with Kid Rock, played for Lee Greenwood. Mike Gould, University of Michigan jazz faculty. Greg Clark, who plays occasionally with Snarky Puppy and Jonathan Scales Orchestra. Wonderful young drummer, actually one of Dennis's disciples, if you will.
Okay.
So yeah, a lot of different different people and different walks of drumming, and I get a kick out of that too. There's a group of educators in South Texas that has taken a whole bunch of my concert snares in, and I don't know what goes on there in South Texas, but it's like a little fan club. So.
Well, it's a good thing that you go by sound and tailor it to whatever genre people are going for, because it looks like you got them all over the place. So it's a good approach then.
Yeah. And it lets me, I get to apply kind of a diverse musical background in terms of my ear and knowing what a drum should do for this type of use and knowing what it should do for that type of use. Actually, I don't tell a lot of drummers this, but I was a music composition major in school. So learning a lot about tonalities and the way instruments blend together, work together, how you use voices has been a help with this.
Definitely. So going back to what you said about taking it to jam sessions, just to kind of get an idea of how it sounds from an outside perspective, do you find that you've was it that you had multiple genres in one evening, or that you would go to different genre focused jam sessions to kind of get that across the board?
Yeah, it depends. It depends on the jam session. I mean, some are, this is a blues jam or this is a funk jam or something. But sometimes you get, there was one I used to go to in the Washington, D.C. area that was ostensibly an R&B blues jam session, but people sitting in would get to call the numbers, and you'd have a country tune, and then a fusion tune, and then a R&B classic. So is that mostly what I pay attention to is different drummers. And there are different touches, the different ways you use the instrument. This is one of the wonderful things about acoustic versus electronic instruments. And I think electronic drums are a lot of fun, but you can't. I remember a Steve Smith video that I haven't been able to find in a while, but it was something where he was drawing maybe 24, 28 different sounds out of a snare drum just by the way he played it.
Wow.
And a good player can do that and has control over it. So their selection of how they're going to hit that drum is a big part of how they define their sound.
Until you kept going there, I was like, yeah, it's electronic drum. Oh wait, you mean acoustic drum?
Oh, did I get him? I'm sorry.
No, I was just kind of, I think I got into the mindset that you're talking about digital. Like, wow.
Sorry.
Okay. Well, awesome. Well, before we wrap it up, I wanted to give you a chance to plug your website again. I know I did already, and any social media or anything so people can find out more about your products.
The website is www.carolinadrumworks.com. The Facebook page is Carolina Drumworks, and Instagram is Carolina Drumworks, one word.
Awesome. And all the popular ones, so all the kids can find you, as well as all the veterans, as you want to call them. Awesome.
I don't, like I say, I enjoy teaching. I like young drummers. I know that they're not in the need area or the financial area for my drums, but they get older and their interests and needs develop, and so sometimes I've had people take 4 years to go from liking the drums to ordering one, and that's okay.
And that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's like, oh, I've discovered it, I love it, can't afford it, but I'm keep it in mind, and I'll get to you when I can.
At some point, it's time.
Yeah. So. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining me today. This has been great.
Thank you. I've had fun. I hope you have.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you for listening to Behind the Backline, brought to you by Octave Media, an inbound marketing agency focused on helping music merchants develop an automated solution to increase website sales. You can find Octave Media at www.octave.media. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast in iTunes or Google Play Music to learn more about great products and companies in the musical instrument, pro audio, and event technology space, and be sure to leave a review to let us know what you thought of this episode. We encourage you to share us with your friends and colleagues via social media, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Hey guys, Matt here from Behind the Backline. I recently released a free on-demand training called 3 Steps to Drumming Up More Website Sales. During the 9-minute video, you'll learn the secrets to streamline your brand's image and dramatically increase your website sales. If you're a music brand or retailer and you want to increase your website sales, go to octave.media/drumoffer today. That's octave.media/drumoffer. And thanks for listening to Behind the Backline.